Hello everyone, Dendro here. So in this video, I want to give my take on what I think is going to happen with the Dendro reactions. Now, of course, I don't know when Dendro is coming, but my guess is that going to be the rest of the year we're going to be stuck with Inazuma, either with finish up the islands, of course, and if there are still more time, we're probably going to be stuck in Inazuma with filler patches. And my guess is that Chasm is going to be released around Christmas this year at the earliest, or we're looking at we're probably looking at Chinese New Year next year. So anytime from late December to mid-February is my guess for when Chasm is going to get released. So with that said, with Chasm there should come the Dendro element, and here is my take on Theorycrafting the Dendro reactions. Now of course, before I get started, I just want to say one news. miHoYo actually asked the community what is the Dendro reaction people are thinking of. Now, of course, they did it on the Chinese server. I'm not sure if there was an English post about this as well, but they did do that, and they said they did take everyone's idea and sort of did some feedback on it. So this is why I'm giving my take on this. So my idea is that Dendro is going to react like the rest 4 elements, so Electro, Pyro, Cryo, and Hydro, and they're going to have normal reactions instead of Geo and Anemo, which only does swirl and crystallize. And I believe that Dendro's main purpose is going to be crowd control. I know this sort of steps into Anemo's territory, however, I don't believe it's the same sort of crowd control. Anemo's crowd control is gathering enemies, while Dendro's crowd control is going to be similar to Zhongli's petrification, where it disallows enemies to move. And I believe the other one Dendro is going to focus on is debuff, which this one is brand new. Other than the superconduct, there is no other ways to debuff enemies currently in game, other than superconduct and 4-piece Viridescent Veneer. But that is not really Anemo's element territory, that is the artifact territory. So I believe it's okay for Dendro to step on both of these. And for debuff, I mean, I took the inspiration from the Dendro Slime, which will actually emit poisonous gas if you stay there too long, which will take dot damage, which means damage over time. And I believe dot damage is going to be the main focus of Dendro reactions, and that is how it's going to work out. So for the rest of the reactions, I'm suggesting all of them will involve some sort of dot damage, which means damage over time, i.e. poisoning. So of course, let's get the obvious one out of the way. Dendro plus Pyro is going to be burning, which causes increased Pyro damage. This one has nothing special, because Pyro is always known for just doing more damage. Pyro plus Hydro is more damage. Vaporize, Pyro plus Melt, Pyro plus Cryo is more damage melt. Here Pyro plus Dendro is even more damage, with the exception of Overload, of course. The second one, Hydro plus Dendro, I believe, of course, we're all thinking of plants plus water equals plants grow. So this, my idea here is that it's basically going to be what the Dendro Sematrons are doing. Essentially, you create spikes from the ground, and these spike plants are not only going to be able to deal poisonous damage, and on top of that, it's going to provide what I would call rooting, which is basically petrification. You're not allowed to move because you're stuck there by those plants. And those plants, like the Dendro Sematrons one, should be able to be destroyed by burning. Moving on to the third one, which is Dendro plus Cryo. The reason I'm going to give is, imagine a plant that is frozen, then what is essentially happened is the inside of the water inside the plant cells freezes up into crystal ice shards, and that punctures the cells of the plants. Essentially, when the plant unfreezes, it just dies. So that is my idea here. I call it frosting, but it's not really, it's basically the layer of frost that you have on plants during early winter. And essentially the idea is here that the Dendro status will be removed from the enemy afterwards, because, as I've said, the plant dies after it gets frozen and unfrozen. However, that not only deals damage to the enemy, because we're considering the enemy's body cell is getting frosted and then defrosted. However, on top of that, this will use that enemy as the target and release the poisoning status to nearby enemies, is going to be my guess for this reaction. Moving on to Dendro plus Electro. Now this one is more of a biased one. Personally, I'm in the camp where I think Dendro plus Electro is going to be another buff going for the Electro element. So going off that basis, my guess here is that it's going to be something similar to Shock, whereas basically you are going to, this one doesn't make sense from a nature point of view. However, my guess is that going to be this one, you can immediately calculate all dot damage, which means all damage over time, and apply it at once, which means this one is actually used for damage, and this way you can buff Electro very much. Because what you can do is you can just use Dendro to stack up like 20 stacks of dot damage and then immediately calculate all of them with Electro, and kaboom, there goes like 3/4 of the enemy's health. And on top of that, I believe this one either allows you to immediately apply Dendro and starting dot reaction again, or this one should just reset the timer for all dot reactions. That's the way I believe this way Electro can get buffed very much. And another reason I have going for this is because all the reactions so far, excluding Geo and Nemo of course, there has been, each element have had its own focus, and I believe they should be start swapping it up too much, a little bit. So let's use each different one as an example. Pyro's focus is big damage. Vaporize and Melts both does big damage, and on top of that, Pyro has the special one which is Overload, which is more of a transformative reaction and used for crowd control, in this case bombing enemies everywhere so they can't really do anything. Cryo, on the other hand, is focused on control. Cryo, either freezing or debuff, is both control related. On top of that, Cryo has the big damage which is Melt. Electro is focused on support. Both Electro Charge and Superconduct is focused on supporting other elements. So in Superconduct's case, it supports physical. In Electro Charge case, it supports Hydro. And however, Electro should have this different one which actually does big damage. And finally, for Hydro, Hydro is focused on control. Hydro is currently split half and half, with Vaporize doing big damage and freezing does control. And of course, Hydro with Electro Charge is kind of hard to explain. However, it is still sort of focused on not big damage is what I'm trying to say. So basically my idea here is that Dendro plus Electro should be a way to deal big damage for Electro, which in this way will be able to buff Electro immediately. So imagine having a Dendro character like Baizhu with Kachin. Even Kachin will be able to be a very good main DPS in the future with this. Essentially what you do is use Baizhu to stack up the maximum of stack of dot damage and use Kachin to immediately calculate all of that. And on top of that, if you have a way of applying Dendro from off field, then you keep stacking the damage and you keep immediately calculating, which means you're basically shortening the time frame needed to deal that much damage by quite a bit, and that is going to be a very nice way to buff Electro. Moving on to the two of the weird ones, so Dendro plus Nemo, I believe it's still going to be Swirl, but I believe it's going to be able to apply poisoning onto nearby enemies, essentially spreading the poisonous seeds in the air. And then Dendro plus Geo, I believe, should still be crystallized. However, I have a very sort of not following the rule idea here. Instead of shields, they should still drop crystals. It's Dendro crystal, but instead of giving the active character a shield, instead when enemies walk on them, it should apply the enemies with poisonous status, and it should also apply anyone within a small AoE range with poisonous status as well. I believe this is how Dendro plus Geo should work, because it makes no sense to have a Dendro shield up. And finally, for the double Dendro elemental res, what I'm looking at is currently all the other 7 res buffs correspondingly what the character, what the element is good at. Electro buffs energy recharge, Pyro buffs attack, Cryo buffs crit, Hydro buffs healing, even though Barbara is only healer, Xingqiu is sort of a pseudo healer. And I believe, did I miss anyone? Geo buffs shields. So that is the case with the 6 right now, and I believe, again, going with my premise here that Dendro's focus is crowd control and dot damage, then in this case I believe that Dendro should buff all dot damage by 20% or extend the duration of all dot damage. And on top of that, if that's not enough, then they can also toss like decrease enemy movement speed by 5% when they're affected by Dendro or something like that, just to further buff the element. Of course, that's something that they can't work out. That's what I have for you today regarding how I think the Dendro element is going to work. Of course, if you have different ideas, you probably do, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. If you like the content, please consider subscribing. Thank you and have a nice day.